Welcome to IT Origins, an interview series from Gestalt IT. Every Thursday, we bring you new interviews with IT entrepreneurs, executives, and engineers to find out how they got their start in the industry and where they see it going. Today, we have the fortune to be talking to Patric Palm, the CEO and co-founder of Favro. Patric, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so let's jump right into kind of the titular question. Can you give me some idea of what your IT origin story is? How long have you been in the field, and how did you get your start?
We started another company called Handsoft, a bit more than 10 years ago. It was the same co-founders as I have now with Favro, and the problem we saw back then was how you scale game development production. So my two fellow co-founders, they had been part of the team that started a game development studio, which is they called Starbreeze Studios, and listed in Sweden, and doing very well. And back then, there was a situation where the amount of people needed to make a AAA game, grew from 10, 15 people in a room to 50 people, 100 people, even more. So in practice, you really get the situation with a team of teams, trying to create a great experience together. And we didn't think that there was really any good tools to support both the technical challenges, but also the creative aspect of creating games. So the product management tools at the time were either kind of traditional tools, or they were glorified ticket trackers, and we just thought there was a need for something entirely new. And I had been working with a lot of tech companies before, and more from kind of a commercialization point of view, helping them get their businesses off the ground. And now we saw an opportunity to start an entirely new company together. So that's what we did. And what it became was it really became a platform for scaling agile software development into very large product teams. So we worked with customers in not only game development, but also in aerospace, defense, telecom, so forth. So that was really how we got deep into the product management space. And what we saw a few years ago was that the agile way of working was really starting to cross over into other kinds of teams, like marketing or even executive groups. And this was very much driven by the fact that the kind of adaptability that you want to achieve with agile product management in software development, that kind of same need for adaptability also started to emerge in other kinds of teams. To take one example, if you think about marketing, it's no longer like what you see in Mad Men with Don Draper in kind of corner office, making all the big shots, and everything's kind of like big bang campaigns. And today, marketing campaigns are much more similar to software development. It's more about kind of building a relationship with micro audiences, and more of a continuous process, and it's way more data driven. So it's much more similar to creating a software product, and then these marketing teams are benefiting from simply picking up the same kind of product management approach as software developers have been pioneering for many years now. So that was that's the driving force behind this, and we just didn't think that there was any good tools in the market that were designed with the whole organization in mind. It was kind of you have to choose between kind of a very big complex enterprise product, or you basically go with any of the teams. The teams basically picking whatever they want, and you're kind of fine with that. But everything's siloed, so it might not really help kind of with the bigger picture. So we had an idea about a design for solving this problem. So that's basically when we kind of got to action and started Favro and launched it a bit more than a year ago, and here we are today now with fast growth and a new company journey. So it's a very exciting time right now.
So how did you initially kind of become interested in game development? Did that come from a software? Was that something that started from an interest in software development in general, and then specifically to gaming, or was as a kid were you a gamer as a kid? I'm just kind of curious.
I think my two fellow co-founders, Eric and Hans and myself, we kind of came into this from somewhat different angles. So in their case, they were teenagers and they wanted to create games, and they had what was called a demo team. So back in those days, you kind of got together and you created these kind of demos to kind of showcase your skill, and you try to make a deal with a publisher, so you would get financing and distribution, so you can actually create a real game. The world has changed a bit since then, because now you can publish on Steam, you can publish any of the app stores. So the market has changed quite a bit. It's a bit similar to the music industry, where before you were dependent on getting that kind of record deal, but now you can self-publish in a whole different way. So the market has changed since then. But back then for them, it was really about they were creating these kind of demos, and they just wanted to start creating games, and they managed to get finances and create this company, and that's basically how they got into it. In my case, it's it is I was a gamer, and back in the Commodore 64 and Amiga days, and it's kind of funny, many of the people that I hang out with then, and we played a lot of games. Some of them went on to become game developers and are quite famous figures today. So there was a lot of talent that was kind of shaped, in the early days during that era. And it's kind of funny. There's actually this book that came out in Sweden called Generation C64, which just captures a couple of these personalities that were, just early, playing a lot of games on the Commodore 64, and how many of them kind of then, went on to become, very influential, IT entrepreneurs and general influencers. So, but in my case, I also had this big interest for organization. So, I was never a good coder, so that was not my path. I did some work in the military, in the Air Force, and as a leadership instructor, and I thought it was very interesting with how small autonomous teams can truly be hyper performing, if the team is put together in the right way and they have the right training and the right group dynamic. So when I later went to university, I wanted to continue to learn more about that whole aspect of the team dynamics of performance. I studied a lot of social psychology, and then when I started working with these tech companies, I was chief executive of a consulting company, helping tech startups to get financing, get to market. It was that kind of interface between the technology and the business and what the customers are actually going to use the technology for. I mean, those kind of three coming together, I always thought was like super interesting. So it was kind of a match made in heaven, when I met with Hans and Eric, and we started to talk about that very specific problem in the game industry, and we had some ideas, how to fix it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach to that, because I feel like a lot of tools, whether productivity, communication, project management, what have you, are originally at least a thought of because something is technically available, or you were able to do more real time, or you're able to share things more easily, but not necessarily coming from an organization first perspective. So that's a really interesting background to have for that.
Yeah, I mean that is very true. I mean, most tool vendors are typically liking a lot of kind of process heavy things, because if you have very defined processes, then you basically set these processes in the tool, and doing various kinds of reporting is something that tools can lend itself naturally to. So very often these tools are quite heavy on that. So if you look at organizations that, let's say, are quite heavy on something like, let's say, Jira, very often, what they like is that they can really, set very defined processes, and they can then, roll that out at scale. But the way, we always thought about it is that, the core of Agile is almost like the opposite. You want to put, the people and interaction between people, front and center. I mean, that is the most important thing. And you want to put that, before processes and tools. That's, one of the pillars of Agile. And then you might say, well, if you're a tool vendor, then, how do you approach that? Well, you need to think, if you're going to make a tool where the tool is not going to get into your way, but really, support that way of thinking, you're going to need a somewhat different design and a different mindset when you design it. And I think this is why we've been recruiting a lot of former game developers to our team. And I think that helps because they have a different mindset. They're not coming in from kind of a tool vendor point of view. They're coming in with a perspective of how do we create something which is an experience for the user. So we with Favro, we sometimes talk about it as, we are really democratizing management. We're making management much more distributed across the organization. So instead of having very specific, managers or directors doing the management part and the rest kind of following, we want to, support that kind of more, broad distribution of power, so to say. And when you do that from a tool point of view, you kind of have to take the management out of management, if you see what I mean. You need to make people not feel like, okay, now I'm a product manager. You need to feel I'm like, well, I'm just, managing my stuff in the team. So that's the key. And I mean, for us, recruiting former game developers has been, one of the keys to be able to approach this problem.
So kind of a little bit of a bigger picture question. What's been kind of the biggest change in the IT or dev space since you started your career? Would you say it's, the development or the coming to prominence of, kind of agile methodologies, maybe moving from, like you were saying, moving from AAA games requiring, a small team to, something equivalent to something like a large movie? I mean, what I was interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of change. I mean, the most obvious thing is, of course, to move from kind of on-premise to cloud. So that has been driving a lot of change. And when we started, most developer tools were were on-prem based, and today most are cloud. The change which is happening right now is that larger organizations are realizing that they need a higher level of sophistication in terms of, let's call it, the enterprise cloud. So they need better security. They need better control over data locality. This is partly driven by things like GDPR. But one thing hasn't been so much discussed is the new Cloud Act in the US that is going to have an effect. And there's just generally a lot of different things, driving the need for enterprises to they need better IT governance, in general, you could say, even when they're in the cloud. And then you have some vendors, like, for example, Microsoft, who really understands this and have the skill, both the vision and skill to address these things. And I think they're doing things in the right direction. And then they're going to be smaller companies who gets this and are addressing this too. And, Favro is one of them. So, I mean, we understand these things and we are giving this to our enterprise customers. But then you're going to have a large, group of, smaller vendors that either can't live up to these requirements, or they're not even trying to do it. They're simply going after more of a kind of a small business market. So that is one really big shift that happened. The other thing that's happened is we, Agile, has for sure shifted a lot of things. But I think one of the big things there is that, the Agile mindset or, Agile philosophy, so to say, have been crossing over into a lot of other things. So, we have, DevOps, we have kind of, lean startup approach and Agile marketing. And today we basically have Agile everywhere. And I think it was the last issue of Harvard Business Review. Their cover feature was, Agile at scale, and they're talking about, okay, now if you want to be competitive in the future as a big company, you need to really think about how you make your whole enterprise, more agile. You need to have a strategy for that. So So that is a big change. But then I would say the third thing, which is quite a massive change, which is happening right now, is that we've been moving from a world where it was very much, you were choosing tools, either kind of an all-inclusive approach with, let's say, Microsoft, or you would have more of a best-of-breed approach. And integration was always a bit of a challenge. And today, we are in a world where, everything independent on if you're buying from one of the big vendors or from smaller ones. It's all cloud-based, and we are today in an API economy where everything's very easily integrated with each other, in a quite seamless way, and that is kind of getting its added features now also with when these integrations are rather bots, and we can have added functionality coming out of that. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening there, and we're going to increasingly have kind of AI. Companionship around these kind of things where, AI is helping you. So, for example, for us, that means that we use AI to basically augment your, product management vision and, help you with things. You don't need to think too much of being a manager, but, a lot of the AI will do that for you. But this means that it's more of an open kind of economy now, where I think we're also seeing the, bigger vendors like Microsoft with 360 are, they seem to be going in the direction where they are okay with that their customer will be using 360, but they will be using a lot of other things, and they might not. Let's say that they might be using 360, but they might not necessarily use Microsoft Teams, but they will use Slack instead, and they might not use Microsoft Planner. They will use Favro instead. And so forth. So it's more open than ever, and I think that's really good.
So would you say that's that kind of example is one of the better trends in IT, and then kind of on the other side of that, what do you think are some of the worst trends you're seeing right now in the industry?
Well, I mean, most trends right now, I think are quite good. The things that are complicated is I think it's the Cloud Act is for sure going to cause trouble, and there's going to be good things. I mean, it forces vendors like us to come up with really great solutions. That's probably in the end of the day are going to do good things. But let's put it this way. There's a little bit of, we can call it, technology nationalism happening here. Where this actually more from a political point of view. Where there are some things happening that are not great. I mean, net neutrality is a very important question, and which is being very challenged right now, and that's I think that's bad news. The Cloud Act, I think at least short to medium term is not great news at all.
And for some context, for listeners that aren't familiar, the Cloud Act is specifically the legal framework that's now, or the legislation that went through that provides a legal framework for U.S. based companies to provide access to data stored on foreign servers. It was kind of partly to resolve a Microsoft or a lawsuit against Microsoft to access info on a Irish server. If that's my understanding of it, or am I incorrect on that?
I mean, basically, U.S. government will be able to, if you're an American company, you need to give access to your data, potentially independent on if it's on, foreign soil. Mm-hmm. If you're now a German company, it doesn't even, if you're dealing with, let's say, Microsoft, it doesn't matter that you're dealing with Microsoft in Germany and everything's happening is in Germany. You're still going to have that potential. NSA is going to be there. So it's and this this is obviously to various degree. This is potentially something that can make it a bit complicated for American companies to do business abroad. So, in one way, it could be good news for vendors like us, for example, because we're a Swedish company. But all in all, I mean, your original question is kind of like, what are some of the negative trends? And I think, just in general, there are a couple of things we see, which is kind of more on a political level, which feels a little bit of a kind of a step backwards. Now, the whole thing, it's very hard to not mention the kind of, Cambridge Analytica thing here as well, and all the, all the kind of heat, which is, on Facebook right now, and there's probably, good things going to come out of that too, I think. But short term, that is going to hit a lot of businesses too, and there's of course a bit of a risk that some of the potential artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence has a lot to do with the data that you have access to, and if we look a little bit forward here, that this could be limiting some things cool things that we might otherwise have seen, but I think at the same time it's a little bit of a kind of a sobering kind of period here now, but I think that kind of had to happen, and that's probably going to. I think there's a couple of very important necessary steps that especially Facebook needs to take, and that this accelerated, and they might not have taken them otherwise. I mean, you take for example dark ads. I mean, it's just it's a I don't understand that Facebook didn't put in tools to get rid of that problem earlier, and that was just a ticking bomb.
Yeah, I think we're right now reckoning that no one had any idea of the scale and value of data at itself, not just for its use in a business, but there's that old saw now. It's kind of a cliche now that data is the new oil, but I think a lot of, in terms of regulation and in terms of how individual consumers are even just viewing it, that's relatively new to their considerations, where, companies have kind of been operating that. And I think, yeah, the pendulum definitely needs to swing back in terms of people reacting to that from a societal and legislative background, for sure.
Yeah.
So, kind of getting more into process, you're a man educated in organization. You kind of you make your Favro is a organizational tool to a certain degree. So, what is your basic approach to organization? And outside of Favro, do you have any must use apps that kind of fall within that?
Well, I mean, the first thing when choosing apps, the absolute first thing is just to think, what kind of organization is it that you want to create and support. And, obviously, I'm big on the agile approach, which means that, one of the key things is to organize in small, autonomous teams, and, really organize around dependencies. So, they will have all the skills and the resources to deliver, value. So we can think about each of these small teams as almost like a little startup. And so, to do this successfully, it's all about giving them the right empowering them the right way, which means that they need to have the right people and so forth, but they also need to have the right tools. And then the second thing is that once you've done this well, you need to start thinking about, okay, well, how do we align all these autonomous teams towards the company goals, so we don't have a situation where they're kind of all going in different directions. And that is basically, the whole trick here. And some companies are very good at this. For example, Amazon, they do a great job at this. With their 2 pizza teams, and how that has created a lot of success for them, obviously. But many other, if you look at Spotify, which is a very topical example right now with their listing. I mean, they also organize in this way. I've done so for a long time. So. So that is, of course, the first thing. And then when it comes to, okay, so what kind of tools to use there? I mean, I'm a big fan of Slack. We have ourselves basically reduced all our internal email. We basically have no internal email. And to some extent, we use Slack also to some extent to collaborate with partners. And we use that in combination with Favro. So Favro and Slack integrated. So, Favro will be the visualization of the workflow, versus Slack will basically be the replacement for the email. So to give an example, when we work with any kind of external company, it could be, let's say, around PR, it could be around certain design things or content creation things. We want it to feel like it's we're all in the same team. We don't want it to feel like, okay, you're this outsourcer, so I'm kind of throwing things over the wall here by shooting an email, and you have that ping pong going back and forth. We want it to feel like, okay, we're one team together and we're working together. So we have a backlog. In Favro we have a flow in Favro, and we will have all our communication happening in Slack. So that will be we'll have a channel for this little team. So for me, that is a key tool. Obviously, I'm also a fan of using Google's various both docs and sheets and so forth. I particularly like them because they work quite well on mobile. So it gives me, since I'm kind of constantly traveling, it helps me to be able to collaborate, with the rest of the guys in my team and outside of our team. So having something like that, I think it's important. And then, of course, things like, GitHub and Mixpanel and all these, great tools now, which is, helping you build a great, data-driven organization. So that's a little bit kind of my topics.
Yeah. And do you have any insight into, it seems like every time any company or organization, tries Slack out, it seems so disruptive to that email workflow. I'm just interested if you have any perspective on why do you think email is so ripe for disruption? Is it just because it's been shoehorned into to fill every kind of communication need, or is there something about Slack itself that since it's collaborative, it's less siloed? I'm just kind of curious from a process perspective if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, email is basically an electronic version of a mail. That's just the name, email, and there's a limitation to that kind of form of communication. I mean, if you look at how we communicate as humans, that's not how we communicate. I mean, it's almost like, think about it like this, because I love video games. So it's kind of, if you compare a turn-based strategy game to a real-time strategy game. I mean, both can be fun to play, but the one which is more close to reality is, of course, the real-time strategy game. War in practice is not turn-based. It is a real-time, thing. And it's the same thing with communication as humans. And if you put a couple of guys in a room, it's not a turn-based environment. I mean, there are, okay, if we're going to be strictly academic about it, there are actually situations like you could say to some extent, let's say a courtroom is actually more of a turn-based communication.
That's an interesting way to think about that.
If we're gonna be really academic about it, so sure, there are situations where humans are actually communicating kind of a turn-based way. But if you're putting 7 people into a room and you tell them, let's fix this problem, it is not a turn-based communication. It is a real-time communication. And now we're in a world where our central workplace is not the office, it's online. I mean, online is our, it's the center of work rather than the office. And then, the tools that we use need to imitate as well as possible how we work as humans. And then, working in a channel-based way, like with Slack or Microsoft Teams or Hangout Chat from Google, it's just a more intuitive, way for us to collaborate. Now, one might say, well, some people that don't like Slack, they say that, well, I don't know exactly what I read, and I can sometimes miss things, and I get a little bit out of the loop, and they kind of prefer that, very structured way of email, where each email, becomes almost like a ticket. But then you're back to square one again, when you start throwing tickets outside instead of, really communicating. And I think if you have an organization where, the mission you're trying to achieve in a team is clear, it doesn't matter if you actually maybe miss a little bit of the communication. You're because it's the same thing. When you're sitting in a room and you're all communicating in real time. I mean, maybe you zone out and there's something maybe you think about your girlfriend or what to eat today, and you miss a part of the communication. Then you're back in again. And it's like the same thing with Slack. It's just that kind of, it's just more close to how we actually communicate as humans. And now when we're online, it's just a more intuitive way. So I think that I think we're just in the beginning of seeing how channel-based communication in the company environment will replace email.
All right, and shifting gears here, any book recommendations for other IT or entrepreneurs or kind of development pros out there? Well,
some of my favorites are, there's one of my absolute favorite books when it comes to organization in some of the big organizations is called The Art of Action by Stephen Bungie. And it's actually not an agile book. I don't think it says really agile anywhere. But what's really interesting about this book is that he talks about, he has an interesting background because he's both a consultant at Boston Consulting Group, but he's also a military historian. So he's kind of talking about some of the challenges that various armies has been going through the ages and how they had to solve them. And he's making some parallels to some of the business challenges that have come up now, and basically how agility is what we need to optimize for. He doesn't call it agility, though. He talks about adaptability. But so that book is very helpful to get a good kind of leadership understanding for how to work with, how to align autonomous teams and how to organize for hyper adaptability. So that one's good. And then there's a relatively new book called The Age of Agile, which is on the same theme, but it comes more from the perspective of agile software development really crossing over into any part of the organization. So I think that's a very good read too. Then I have, if you want to do something, I mean, if I can take one of my absolute personal favorites, which is a little bit more kind of far out in a sense, is a book that recently came out called Teaming. And it's called Teaming, and the subtitle is How Superorganisms Work to Build Infinite Wealth in a finite world, and your company can do. And this is written by Tamsin Woolley Barker, and she's a researcher of biomimicry, and biomimicry is the science of imitating nature, nature's design for problems that we want to solve as humans. So I mean, the most kind of obvious examples of that is aerodynamics, where you would imitate how a bird is designed for building a good airplane. But this book is focused on organization, and it's focused on the she's basically concluding in the beginning of the book that adaptability, that is where we're going. That's what we need to optimize for. If we want to take humanity to the next level, we need to be much better at how we are becoming more adaptable, which is very natural because the whole term survival of the fittest is really not the strongest or fastest. It's really the most adaptable. So in this book, she's basically going through different strategies that nature are using for hyper adaptability, and that we could be inspired by as humans and human organization. So it's a very, very different approach to how to organize, but I think it's a very relevant one. Now taking what we just talked about.
Yeah, it sounds super fascinating. I hadn't heard of that before. We'll definitely have to have notes for all of those books in our show notes. So check that out in the post itself. But yeah, those sound amazing.
Cool.
All right. And first computer you ever owned, Patrick?
That was the Commodore 64.
Okay. The old. Did you have a tape drive for that, I wonder?
Yes, I did.
That's still I was born in 1985. I did not ever own a Commodore 64. I kind of came to the age in computing in the age of Windows. It still blows my mind that that tape drives were, the commodity, persistent storage of its day. It still boggles the mind.
Yeah, and but it was it was a good machine, and I mean I think it. If you look at the impact it had on many people's lives, it's quite fantastic. I also have to say, one thing I so enjoyed is, the other year, Nintendo came out with basically, their original NES in super, mini format, and I got one of those, and I actually it's so small, so I actually had it in my bag for a while when I was, traveling for business, and I just connected it to every TV in the hotel room, and I just played through, all the classics, and I loved it. It was so much fun.
Yeah, the way they replicated a lot of the old CRT scaling is amazing.
Yeah.
Can I ask, in Sweden, was the Commodore 64 as popular? I know it was kind of pervasive in the States, but did it have that same kind of penetration in Sweden?
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. And so what are you doing when you're not traveling all over the world and working in IT, Patric?
Well, I have a tendency to start things, so I have started quite a few NGOs and just things I think are important. So I have a tendency to get involved in starting things when I'm not building something company wise. But then I'm actually quite I think it's quite fun with ballroom dancing. So I do quite a bit of that, which I am for sure one of the very few in kind of the software community that does. But it's just a lot of fun to visit friends that are organizing something around the world where there's an opportunity to actually dance to a proper orchestra. So one of the highlights of the year is in the beginning of the year the ball season in Vienna, and they do ballroom dance like the rest of us do rock festivals, and it's everything is like taken from a movie really, and it's just a lot of fun.
Do you do that recreationally or is competitively at all?
No, I do it recreationally. Yeah.
That sounds like a blast. I would love to see like a festival like that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the really biggest one, you actually have like thousands of people, and all in tailcoats and doing the Wiener Waltz and the cool because they grow up with it there. So most people know how to dance pretty well in Vienna. So you kind of blows your mind how good they are. I was just thinking, I mean, sometimes you see some parties, some what's called, let's say, a ball in the US, and people like dancing with each other, but very few actually know how to dance. I mean, if you want, people that actually really knows how to dance are typically kind of communities where you dance, let's say salsa. So if you go to, let's say, Miami and you go to like a salsa club, I mean, then you have a bit of the same experience, and you go into a club and everyone knows how to dance and everyone does it, right? So that's a lot of fun. But this is in this case, it's Wiener Waltz, so you go to this place and everyone knows how to do it and everyone does it, and it's just so much fun.
All right, and very important question for anyone in software development or startups: how do you caffeine?
Well, I'm Swedish, so we just drink a ton of coffee,
Well, so black, or do you have any? Is there a particular type of bean or anything like, or any kind of way you like to make your coffee?
I think Swedes in general, we're big on filter coffee. We don't make we don't make it too complicated. One really big, Starbucks actually never really made it big in Sweden, and the reason is that you are typically having some pretty good coffee making, in the actual office. So you can always go and have a coffee, and it's going to be high quality coffee, and that is how most offices work in Sweden. So the market for kind of like going down and getting a coffee, it's not the same as in the US, where someone would typically run down and get a couple of cups of coffee or so. We don't have that because we just make very good coffee in the office, and it's a very Swedish thing. It's everywhere.
Excellent. And so to get you out in the last two questions here, who would you like to see answer the IT origins question if you could pick anybody?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. the story behind Slack, I think, is very fascinating. So I'm not going to say that because that is pretty well documented. So that question has been asked many times, but I think it's a great example of how a company often needs to do quite a few pivots there in the early days to navigate to what's going to be the success. I would say I would be really interesting to hear the true story. Actually, one of our clients, Magic Leap, but I actually never really how it really started from the beginning. I would actually love to hear that. I mean, they're very secretive. That would be fun.
Yeah, I would love to talk to anyone from Magic Leap and get their origin story. That would be really cool.
Yeah. So that would for sure be one of them. And then I give you another one, which is would actually be quite interesting to get more of the inside story of actually NSA, because I'm thinking, maybe you. There's been a couple of movies lately that has to do with some kind of early code breaking things, like Second World War, so forth. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of stuff also happening right now. I mean, and I know there's probably a lot of kind of Hollywood movie worthy material coming from inside there. So independent on what one kind of thinks about their business, it would be interesting to just kind of get some of the true inside stories there.
For sure, yeah, that's both great ideas. We'll see if down the road we can get some kind of perspective on it. Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a challenge for you there.
And we'll get you on this. Just a nice, easy question here. Best career advice you've ever received?
I think the best career advice I ever received was, there was a time. This is kind of funny. There was a time, just when I was in the end of university, when I was considering, there was a couple of, really attractive jobs that I had a good shot at getting, without naming any specific companies, and they were considered to be very, very good career moves. And I was kind of coming out very strong from university, having done a lot of things on the side and so forth, and then he was. He was working as a headhunter at the time, and we were just having coffee. And I wanted to ask him. I basically wanted his career advice because I wanted to choose between these various great offers I had. And he said, Patrick, you're already too senior for all of this. It's just there's no other path for you than to create your own business. I mean, you're gonna be bored at all of these places. So you have to jump in and start a business. All the other things, it's too late for you. Basically, he was saying that I was like too old, even though I wasn't old in age, But that was great. I mean, that was kind of like the one of the important kind of kick in the butts that I got that made me like, okay, I should probably pursue a more entrepreneurial career, and then one thing led to another, and that's the path I've been on ever since. So that was a good advice.
Yeah, well, speaking of your entrepreneurial career, if people want to check out more about Favro, where should they go? Favro.com?
Yes, it's as simple as that. You go to favro.com, so you can sign up for free, try it out. There's, plenty of great articles there, around things, related to, organization in an agile way.
Excellent. Well, Patric Palm, this has been a pleasure, and thank you for being on IT Origins.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.